sell by date, it just spoils. Same shit, a different day. Reality is darker and grimmer. What thrills and entertains, for a small fee will proudly be the evil that satisfies your craving.
Hello, welcome to Castle Does, and you are here to see the final video that I'm going to do where I'm focusing on my TF2 CTF level. This level is the art phase, which means that it ended up taking just as long as the previous 3 videos. It's a huge amount of work, so it ends up going by even faster. But there were still plenty of things that ended up happening that were pretty entertaining. Texture skewing, for example, seems to be this weird issue with Hammer where when you actually skew the brush, the texture will skew with the brush and then it'll just unskew itself. And then I ended up searching all over the web and I was completely unable to figure out if there was actually a way to skew textures. There were other things as well, and that was a cat. You might have heard the cat. Anyway, let's get started. Okay, so for the very first part of this, the very first thing I did once I decided that this is time for the art phase is I removed all dev textures, replaced them with no draw. Use no draw on all surfaces that cannot normally be seen, and any surfaces that are behind any kind of entity-based brushes or anything like that, so that they don't take up light map data, they don't add polys. So my goal now is like, well, you have a level with no walls, floors, or ceilings that are visible. It's time to make everything look pretty anyway, so get busy, you know, it's kind of like cracking the whip. So when I'm in the art phase, I like to pick an area and focus on one area at a time, and then work my way through all of the different areas, which is a completely different method from designing, where I'm focused on the entire level at once. Here's one of the first problems I ran into. If you watch this real carefully, see that? I'm skewing the brush, I'm trying to make the texture skew. So I ended up getting kind of frustrated and trying to figure this out. Okay, so this ended up being a problem that I ran into extremely early. But it was like one of the few problems. And it's easy to understand like why it would be a problem. The only thing is that it was confusing for one reason. The way Hammer, when you manipulate your brush, Hammer does this thing where it actually skews it properly. So if I have a hallway that's just, you know, that turns into like a ramp or a stairwell, it's nice when my texture, you know, lines up perfectly right here, and skewing's excellent for that. Like, so if I have like a line on the texture, it would just skew it like that. Right? And all I have to do is just grab the brush and then skew it. That would have been super easy, right? But there's this weird thing that Hammer does that made it very confusing. I'll show you. Okay, so here's an example hallway I grabbed out of my map. And on this side you can see that I was unable to actually skew the texture, but what ended up happening was you get a little seam right there. It's very difficult. It's really super difficult to get that seam if you're not able to skew textures. And you know, I understand that skewing textures is a difficult feature to implement on brushes and texture coordinates and everything like that, but I wasn't really sure if that's what the problem was. I thought maybe it was texture lock was turned on, or maybe there was some option. Maybe there is. I'm still confused. But look, you see how perfect this is when I actually manipulate the brush and then I let go of left mouse button and boom. What the hell? It goes right back to the way it was. So I'm sitting here wasting all this time trying to figure out maybe, you know, well, obviously it could do it. It just did it. Why won't it just, well, that's all I want. Well, why? Why? So I end up trying over and over again all these different options. Maybe turn it into a displacement or whatever. I keep trying and it keeps going back to the way it was. You know, it'd be one thing if it just didn't work at all, but here it is, it's working perfectly fine as far as I can tell, but it wasn't telling me exactly why it wasn't, you know, why it would just jump right back again. Oh well. Okay, so this is a pet peeve of mine. Door frames or door textures that are set up like this, where I have to manually figure out exactly how to perfectly line it up. Like, who? I realize that these textures are probably pretty old and whatever, but why? Why ever design a door texture like that? What is that? Like trying to get the textile density to be absolutely perfect? What are you, in software? It's like the quality of life of the designer. I could have clicked one thing, fit to face, boom, if the door was just done right. But you were worried about textile density or something like that. I don't know. Why would it ever work that way? It should never, no door texture should ever be set up that way, ever. It doesn't matter how big the actual door should be. Fit the face, man. It's the way things should work. It's easy, it's fast. Or just make it a model. But don't put a black frame. That's the worst thing you could ever do. Hate door textures like that. It's a peeve of mine. So at this point, the home base for the blue team is starting to come together. There are a lot of models that I ended up having to make, like a model farm and everything like that. I put a whole bunch of bottles of like formula or like some kind of like muscle pills or something like that. I have a whole bunch of them sitting in the first room you start out in. I just want to put humor. I think TF2 is excellent about its humor. I always like to try to capture that. A lot of little tiny details. Sometimes I was wondering if I was putting too much, but I look at some of the TF2 maps and they're extremely detailed, and some of them are a little bit less. Turbine is an example of a map that's not as detailed, but there are plenty of maps that have, you know, tons of detail everywhere. And it ended up still looking really good. It's still very consistent, but you can definitely tell that there are different designers who work on different stuff, huh? So as I might have mentioned before, like, I focus on one area at a time when I'm doing art, which is, like I said, is a completely different method from, it's complete divergence from the entire, like, trying to focus on the entire level. Whenever I'm doing the block out, I'm more concerned about everything, the flow of the entire map. But at this point, I'm more focused on just one room at a time, so I ended up being on these 2 rooms for like 5 hours. And then I ended up going to the base, and that's another 3 hours. Art takes time. But it ended up being almost like rebuilding the whole level again. You know, one of the things that's kind of noteworthy about this is that when I'm watching this video, knowing where I ended up, it feels like I'm watching myself climb a mountain. This doesn't feel like, yeah, check this out. It feels like, oh my God, when I was at this point, I didn't know what I was going to do next. My goodness. But, you know, everything came together. It just feels, it was like a journey, man. And I did know basically what I wanted to do in each area. I had pre-planned everything before I even started. Especially true now that, you know, I'm recording myself and like working on it. I try to think ahead even more. That way I don't end up painting myself in a corner. But that's usually just a basic practice of just wanting to make the map on time. If you're working with deadlines and stuff like that, you know, you want to shoot for the right goals like right away. So I ended up just kind of going through with my plan. Everything pretty much panned out. But it's like it's suspenseful. Like, okay, is this gonna work, or am I gonna end up having to spend more time doing all this? I knew I needed to get signage. I knew I needed to get the models. Man, it was just a lot of trial and error, trying to like, all right, I'm gonna put a little arch in this hallway. This has to be the toughest part for me personally. I know that art is easier for other people, but for me, when it comes to the art, you know, the part where I'm actually putting the level's art in, that ends up being probably the toughest part for me personally. Here I wanted to put like a cool turbine type energy thingy in the back, you know, behind glass, in sort of like a cavey area or something like that. Something kind of cool to look at through the glass. I like those kinds of details, and they're very common in TF2 maps, actually. More so than I've seen in most other games. Is TF2 likes to have those rooms that are off to the side that have something that you can't quite reach, but you can definitely see. And I wanted to try and do that a lot myself. So I end up with this cool like area in the back of the CTF area, and a lot of brush cleanup. That's another thing that happened. While I was doing this, all of the problems of like unoptimized brushes and like the quick building that I was doing, as I was writing the map, I went in as well to clean everything up, and I did a pretty extensive job. Like pretty much everything ended up getting touched. Like these hallways right here, like all those messy brush, all that messy brushwork there, T-junctions that were making things, light maps not quite right, all the hallways, everything got touched. Which is a good thing, because there was a heck of a lot of stuff in the map that needed it. A lot happened in this. I mean, it's actually pretty amazing. This is running at 32 times speed, and it still ended up being 28 minutes. This was 14 hours of footage for this, which the previous 3 videos were at about 3 hours apiece. We're about 4, maybe 5 hours apiece. They sort of ranged in that general amount. So I guess in a way that puts this up to about 30 hours of effort for the map in its current state right now. And you think, well, 30 hours is a pretty decent amount of time, right? Well, it kind of is, except even at this point in time, I still can't consider the map finished. Even in the state that it is at the end of this video, it's not 100% done. I still have other things that need to be done, like I want to do optimization pass, which is a whole nother video. Like there's gonna be like just 20 videos of this one map, and I'm ready to start moving on to other stuff, like for other engines and other games. I'm going to continue working on this level regardless, but there's just so much that still needs to be done, especially at this point in the video. It's like I'm not even halfway there yet. You can see here that you know, like I put more details into the power generator room, and putting railings up, and making sure that the smoothing groups and luxel densities are correct for the arch hallways. I'm doing my clipping passes already, because you know, it's pretty straightforward stuff, knowing where things need to be clipped, trying to decide what I want to do with the floor in this area. Man, everything at this point was going pretty smoothly. I felt like once the flag room was laid out artistically, I was at a point then where I was pretty confident to be able to move on to the rest of the map. The big hurdle, of course, is figuring out what I wanted to do outside. The center area, when I last had the map laid out, and during playtesting, one of the main complaints was that the center area wasn't safe enough, and also that there was a lack of interesting combat overall, which wasn't like it was like a general complaint. It wasn't like this area sucks. It was more like the map kind of needs a little bit more vertical gameplay, a little bit more, just general over-under combat, things like that, different, in more interesting situations. This air vent right here, I ended up having to kind of go through and make sure that I can rebuild it so that I can line up the textures correctly, and it ended up being a bit of a task to kind of like figure out how I wanted to line everything up. This is also the first time, once I finished the air vent, that was the first time I actually decided that I wanted to start going outside and putting more details outside. I already have a plan at this point about how I want to handle the center of the level, and I want to put a bridge that goes across and then have windows that are more specific. But before I wanted to get to any of that, the main thing I wanted to do is figure out exactly how I want to tackle the mountain, the side of the mountain that goes above the level. So this was what, my third try now. Like, out of all the times, before it was just kind of placeholders, but this time I was actually getting ready to do it. So I actually begin, doing my first walkthrough with displacement meshes, and ever since I worked in Sin episodes. This is like I'm kind of coming back and trying to learn all this. And the plan was kind of have the mountain kind of form over the top of the thing and kind of make it look like everything was built into the side of the mountain. The only problem is that it didn't quite work out how I wanted it, and it ended up looking not quite right. And then I duplicated it and everything like that, and I decided to focus on something else for a little while I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But I take one good look at the rock, the rocks above the level, and Ren walks over and she says that it looks like somebody put pie dough on the top of the level. It looks like pie dough, like somebody made a fresh batch of pie dough and just flopped it on the roof of the building, and there you go. And I'm like, pie dough, this is not acceptable. I want mountain, a steep, realistic looking mountain, and I got pie dough. So I deleted it all. I'm like, okay, I have to approach this much different angle. So I deleted that and began working on a different, all the other outside area stuff, laying out the bridge, getting the windows in place, putting stuff like that, so that I can begin thinking about how I wanted to handle the mountains or the backdrop. And at this point, there's a heck of a lot of stuff that's just coming together right now. I'm getting the windows in place. I'm getting actual staircases that look like stairs inside of these towers, and I'm doing a lot of fixes for the way the doors work, make sure the doors open at the proper speed, fast enough, and figuring out how I want to go about putting details on the roofs, and figuring out where I want detail to go. There's just a lot of other stuff going on, but in the back of my mind the entire time I'm thinking, alright, how am I going to handle a skybox? How am I going to handle a skybox? I know how the skybox works. If you do a skybox, you can do it's a shrunk down box that's outside of the map, where you can have the geometry line up perfectly. It's actually really intuitive, really awesome way to do it, and it works amazingly well. I ended up kind of veering a little bit away from that, though, in the form of having mountains actually physically in the map, but just lowering the luxel density on those polys to make it so that it wasn't as though I was wasting light map data. So I decided that I wanted to put the roofs of these buildings and actually detail them out. So that's what you're seeing right here, is I'm actually going through and making it look like an actual roof, and then I'm going to have the mountains behind it and expand it out. One of the tricks that I did when I started doing the art phase was I immediately grabbed chunks of other maps and then put them in a what's called a model farm, outside of the level in a little box, and I would just fly over and into the model farm, grab items that grab any objects that I can do that look good, and just start propagating them into the level, copying stuff from other maps and then changing them around to be exactly what I need. So far you're looking at that a lot. I don't kid around when it comes to that. I propagate things from other maps. I don't try to reinvent the wheel every 5 seconds, because I think it's a silly thing to do. And I guess it's something that I ended up preaching more than once during this process. So I have these catwalks right here, this like scaffolding to allow you to get up to the top, which looked a little weird at this point in time, and I'm pretty sure that it'll end up getting another art pass. I want to do blending on the textures for the roads. So one of the things I have to do is make sure that I'm allowed to use a displacement, and I move the ground down a little bit so that there won't be any leaks, and made sure that I can have a displacement and then paint like sand. At first it might look a little strange, like why would I be doing it like this at this point? But until you see the mountains on the outside that I'm planning on doing, it won't look right. So it looks strange at this point in time. So at this point, I feel like I pretty much have the art at a decent stage on the blue side of the map. So I begin to copy everything over. And here's something that popped up that was really difficult for me to solve. So on the blue side of the map, there's these wires, right? The model only goes to the left. So I don't even know. I'm still trying to comprehend how exactly you can't change the way the models their transforms are not modifiable in this engine. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know for sure. But since it only goes to the left, I can't have those wires on the red side because it doesn't line up, because I need the wires to go to the right, and they don't line up correctly no matter what I do. It's really weird. I try to like look at turbine and copy the wires. Maybe there's like wires that are designed for it. I don't understand. There was just a weird thing there. So I ended up just not having the wires at all on the red side. Otherwise, everything else went really smoothly. I was able to replace all the textures. I once again ended up having to just basically delete all the old geometry, which was no big deal, because compared to the arted out version of the map, the old stuff looked like a there was a fraction of the brushes to even deal with. I was able to delete everything in like less than a minute, basically, without deleting any of the stuff I wanted to keep. So everything is just going really well. I put a push volume on the waterfalls. I made sure that you can't build inside of the air vents. There were a lot of feedback things that I've noticed. Now I'm putting windows on the other side. Now this is basically just propagating a lot of the stuff that I had already done on the blue side, and making sure that it's also active on the red side. And that's basically it. I mean, this is sort of just watching the same thing I just did all over again, but faster, because it's already done. Getting textures lined up, and this part right here, I could have probably done this a lot faster. So I ended up replacing the metal struts with wooden struts. So I ended up manually going through every single surface. It happened really quick in the video, but it ended up taking like maybe 30 or 40 seconds to get all that done. Ugh. Well. Yep, now I'm getting the roof done on the red side. The roof right now, the roof is right before I begin working on the skybox. And the first time I tried to do anything with the skybox was I tried to use well, you'll get to see. I tried to do the the smaller scale version first, and it didn't quite line up, and things weren't quite how I wanted. And I actually felt a lot more comfortable just building the mountains within the actual level. However, there is still a lot of stuff in the skybox that I ended up using anyway. At this point, doing the telephone pole wires for the splines, those cool physics-driven telephone pole wires, and then I begin working on the skybox stuff, cleaning it up, getting the brush geometry right. And what I realized is that 000 is where the sky camera, the skybox camera, will project, to the outside of the rest of the world. So what I ended up doing was I dragged the entire map over, and you can see right here, or just a moment ago, I dragged the entire map over, and then for some reason now I couldn't compile the map without getting leaks. And the reason for that is because some of the trigger brushes have origins that will not update when you move them. If you physically move your level so that it's centered on the skybox, on 000, so that you can get your geometry to line up perfectly with the skybox, then you have to be ready for the fact that some of the entities, some of your triggers, it ended up being triggers for me, will not have their origins move. So you have to manually select every single trigger that you have in the map, select the origin thing, and then drag the origin back into the center of the brush. That was pretty weird, but I ended up doing it pretty quickly. Once I figured out what it was, the thing is that I was just getting leaks that were out outside of the map. Completely no explanation. I couldn't quite understand exactly what was happening. I was looking at the error, like what was causing it, and it took me a little bit longer than it should have, I think, to really figure out that that's what was causing those leaks. That was kind of annoying. So at this point I'm sort of restructuring and opening up the outside area so that I have a lot more space to actually build the mountains in the distance like I want to. I raised the skybox up, and I ended up having to raise all of the clip brushes as well. That way nobody can figure out a way to start floating in the air. Damn sneaky soldiers. I get preliminary brushwork in place for displacements, and this time I actually got it to work. Actually, this time it ended up at this point, like running around in the level after this edition is when the level actually starts to look pretty good. I'm actually pretty happy with the results. I was able to do blending. I grabbed chunks from other maps and resized them and did all kinds of stuff like that as well to really speed things up and get it done on time. And at this point, you really see the level start to form. Yeah, and these areas start just looking so much better. Like when I run around on the map now, I see this sky out there, a little bit of fog. It just looks so much better at this point. It's outstandingly better. It's hard to imagine going, looking at the old video, like the older videos, and seeing what this level looked like, 3 weeks ago. It looks so different now. And at this point, going through, getting all of these details in place, everything I can try to do this. At this point, the map is pretty much ready to go, and everything is just touch-ups and little details here, putting some barrels under the water, and making sure that their models aren't rendering at the wrong time, or doing my best to try to get everything in place. I put like another wall that's like further out. A lot more clouds. I wanted a lot more clouds. Ended up getting like more touches for the textures to make the textures look a little bit better. Yeah, at this point, the map's looking pretty much about done, although it still needs more passes at detailing and stuff like that. Now, one of the other weird things I've noticed is that the map is fairly far along, and I'm starting to get these weird texture problems where I'm like, well, look at our brick texture, or I'm working in one of the areas with a brick texture, and everything just gets the UVs on the texture just completely fart, like just broken. And then I change the camera angle a little bit, or move forward or back, and then it goes back to normal again. It's weird. I don't know if anybody else has had to deal with that before, but if you watch really closely, I know things are happening pretty quickly. You might see it happen in some of these shots where I'm just like working, and all of a sudden textures everywhere, just blah. Oh man! At this point, I'm doing sounds. There's a sound pass, ambience for particles, and making sure the waterfall looks good, making sure all the other little details. That's pretty much good. Alright, so here we go. First thing to take a look at is the muscle pills.
Eat my dust!
I'm not sure what those bottles are exactly, but they're pretty funny. You can see I detailed out everything on both sides. There, you got the base running around, side rooms that have detail in them. I could probably have done that a little bit more. It's pretty cool. It's got that's that side room there. The air vents are in place. Like, it's pretty far along. I'm sure there's going to be things that need to be tweaked or changed in later versions, but this is probably about what the map's going to look like when it goes RC1. There's maybe the center area may end up getting a lot of changes, I'm predicting. There's waterfalls, ambience. This level came a long way. It may still have a bit to go, but man, 30 hours of work, it's not half bad. Not half bad. Let's see. Yeah, so far, I'm pretty happy with it. I'll have to get a playtest going, figuring out what I'm going to do with hint brush placement and any kind of optimizations that I can work for better occlusion culling. I could probably make the map run at a higher frame rate on lower end machines. Pretty sure.
Wave goodbye to your secret crab, dumbass!
Otherwise, the brushwork and everything like that's pretty optimized. Technically, the map, I really haven't had any trouble getting the level to run on a technical level, like making the spawns and the doors and everything like that. Everything functions pretty much out of the box. Didn't have any real trouble with that. The Team Fortress 2 mapping development pipeline is pretty damn intuitive. It was nothing like some of the others I've ever worked with. Well, that's that. Okay, so this will be the final video where I focus solely on the TF2 CTF map. This is also the first time that I've really had a chance to do any kind of video segments talking about level design and everything like that. I'm going to try and move on to the next engine. However, don't worry, I'm going to keep working on this level until I finish it. It'll be RC1 very soon, unless there ends up needing to be some big changes or something like that, which I'm fairly confident it's in good shape, but I probably shouldn't have said that. I jinxed it. My next focus is going to end up being on, well, I'm going to go all the way back to the very beginning of first-person shooters, and the next segment will actually be Wolfenstein. And I'm not talking about Wolfenstein 3D. I'm talking about, well, not Wolfenstein on the Quake engine. I mean Wolfenstein, like old school Wolfenstein. I thought about doing like Rise of the Triad and stuff like that, but there's just so many other games. I'm gonna end up just focusing on, you know, the main series. I have it detailed out on which ones I'm gonna be doing, and hopefully at that point I'll have things a bit more cleaned up, and maybe if I'm lucky I'll have some better video development software. Anyway, thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed. I wonder if this is the first time anybody's ever actually filmed a video of a level design like this from like block mesh all the way up to art. Kind of curious about that, actually. I've been looking up. I haven't really seen. I've seen people get up to the block mesh phase, maybe, but never this far along. Interesting. All right. Thank you for watching, and see you around.